Joe Franklin is with us right now. Joe Franklin has been on WOR-TV, Channel 9, for how many years?
I would say I began about 1953, Bill. I was, no, I started on Channel 7, and I went to Channel 9 in 19.
You've been doing a talk show since?
I think I did the first talk show. They asked me one time if I could occupy an hour a day on TV. I think TV at that time was on from 6 o'clock until sermonette. Remember when they used to sign up?
Yeah.
So they asked me if I could occupy an hour a day. And I said, I'd love it. They said, what kind of a show would you want to do, Joe? I said, how about an hour of kids dancing to phonograph records?
No, that will never work. Let's do something else. Joe, you're nuts. Who will watch kids dance on TV?
Look at Dick Clark with his 12 vaults full of money today, right? And I said, well, how about a show of people singing old-time songs, you know, like community sing?
Ah, Joe.
They said, Joe, you're nuts. Look at Mitch Miller, right today? So I said, well, how about I just do a show talking? They said, now we know you're nuts. They said, the word is television. The accent's got to go on the word vision. This, you know, remember the days of Jerry Lester and Dagmar and Broadway Open? They said, you got to give them slapstick and baggy pants and pratfalls. But I defied them. I said, I want to do a show just nose to nose, eyeball to eyeball. My first guest was Fannie Hurst, probably. Nobody ever heard of Fannie Hurst. Great. By the way, what Pia said...
Wait a second, Fannie Hurst.
She wrote Imitation of Life, Backstreet. I just want to say what Pia said. I think the highlight of the whole show was when Pia said that her mother was amazed how people can talk without scripts. I think your mother was being... She was kidding you, because I've interviewed, as you know, 67,000 people, including all the ones that you read never went on talk show. You read in the paper how Humphrey Bogart never did a talk show, John Wayne never did, Gary Cooper never did, Elvis Presley. I've had them all. I never had one that was not super intelligent without a script. People always say, if I'm at a lecture, Spencer, they say, Joe, I bet movie stars without a script, they're ignorant, but they are so wrong. If you got big, you are smart.
But haven't you interviewed some that didn't get big and they were difficult? Because I've certainly had those. We've had those a couple of... Yes.
Well,
the ones that aren't.
The ones that
and
are on the way up haven't made it.
Impossible sometimes.
They're dumb. They're dumb. But if I...
Now we get down to the bottom line.
Let's run around the panel with some of the people who've been on, who maybe didn't even get on the air, and I'll save my story for last. In all the years, you must have had some guest who was so out of it or didn't make sense.
I've had 4 or 5 didn't like me, got up and walked away.
Who walked out on you?
Rosemary Clooney. But of course, later on.
What did you say to Rosie?
She was sitting with me, and I said to her, Ms. Clooney, I said, last night I went to see Jose Ferrer in Man of La Mancha. She says, you know, we're not married anymore, Charlie. So I said, my name isn't Charlie, my name is Joe. But I just wanted to make the point, I said, Rosie, that he was a pretty good singer. She got up and walked away. Didn't want to hear about it. And later on, I found out that she was going through a mental depression at that time. We became very close friends after that. And John Gavin got up and walked. I've had.
Why did John Gavin walk?
I don't know.
Imitation of interviewing?
Didn't like me. Didn't like me. Ernest Borgnine walked away because I said his name, Ernest Borgnini, but I didn't know.
You never even did the interview with Ernest Borgnini. No.
Anytime a guest is dull, I was on Stanley Siegel's show and I saw Stanley bawl out his staff because a guest was dull. It was an author. If a guest is dull, I bawl myself out. It behooves me. If a guest is dull,
bring it up.
I've got to bring him out. I got to look at his eye.
There are some guests who, particularly, and this is Midday's a public affairs show, we will get guests on who are as well-meaning as sunshine. But boy, they are dull as mud.
Well, many authors are making the rounds.
I do everything I can to bring them up, but there is no way.
Many authors are making the rounds. They don't want to make the rounds, but they were told by their publisher, you know, the editor says, you know, your last book didn't sell so well, Herman. So if you want to, you're right.
And some of them hurt themselves going out on those tours because they get on these television shows and the public says, wow, that guy's a stone. I'm not going to buy his book.
How about you, Jack? In your career, can you think of someone you wished hadn't been on, or they walked out, or it didn't work, something like that, or kill the tape?
I don't have a recognizable name at the tip of my tongue. Pia's got one that I think maybe if she had it to do over again. I was involved on that show.
I had Diane Ladd who came on to do a spot on Live at 5. And I was the theater critic during the time when she opened up on a play,
Texas Trilogy?
Texas Trilogy, and I, among many people, did not care for it, and the play closed shortly after it opened, right? I was not going to even bring up this to this woman because now it's 3 years later, and she has a new success. She's got a new CBS show. We were going to talk about her success. But right away I could tell there was something the matter because as I leaned over to talk to her, she sort of went like that, you know, and was doing all these strange and looking elsewhere. I knew things weren't going well. And then in the middle of it, she suddenly turned on me and started saying, you are the one who closed, you know, my play, and it was all your fault. And the playwright afterward had a heart attack and died. And I mean, I was saying, are you saying that I it was my review. I mean, I was one of many. Anyway, at that moment, as I told you the other night, I had the experience of having two voices at once in my ears, and I was thinking maybe it was the right brain and the left brain. One side was saying, "Oh, stop her, we've got to stop this woman," and the other brain was saying, "Don't do anything. It's wonderful television. It's just great. Let her go, let her go, let her go. She's going to hang herself any minute." Anyway, I listened to that second voice, and I didn't say anything. I just let her go on.
One quick thing. When you do give somebody or some play a bad review, as a reviewer, do you feel embarrassed when you meet them in public?
Yes.
It's
do.
hard, I would think.
I
Bill,
do.
do you get much comment when you're on my show? Tell me the truth.
I did get some comment, yeah.
Nick, how about
Well,
you?
that's because, Bill, you know that Joe is really a national talk show host because of cable. He's
I'm on
seen all over the country.
1,600 stations.
I know that.
I'm getting heavy mail every day from Hawaii, Alaska, California. And I predict, I want to say this now on your show, Bill, by 1985, every man, woman, and child in this country will have his own TV talk show.
Yeah, but Joe, but if you ever had a guy on with a bag over his head, that's the measure
I've got him on tomorrow.
of achievement.
By the way, why you on against? When I started in TV, I was the only man at 9 o'clock in the morning, right? Now I'm fighting Spencer, Good Morning Manhattan, Phil Donahue, Stanley Siegel,
Right, you're on there too.
Mike
It's
Douglas.
funny. I always think of your show. I see your show in the evening replay.
Oh, yeah.
That's why I never think of
I
it
was the
being
first
at
one
9 in
on
the
late at
morning.
night. Then I got Tom Snyder doing tomorrow. By the way, this is serious. If you want to print it, I had an offer. Fred Silverman asked me if I want to do a little bit every day in the Tomorrow Show called Yesterday. It's no joke. And I might do it.
Well, I would. I think that would be fun to do.
Fred
Jim.
met his wife, Catherine, through me. I go. Everybody meets in my studio. Everybody meets in my studio.
That's right. I met a guy in your studio who tried to fleece me.
Right. That's true. Right. Nothing wrong with
I'm
that.
just kidding. We'll be back right after this. I am having fun today. I think we should take the show on the road. This is a nice group here. Now, we want to shift back. Everyone will maybe, if possible, tell a story of a guest who you wish hadn't been on the show or something really terrible happened that made you wish that you could erase the tape.
Nothing quite like that.
Oh.
Our show's only now going into its third year, but once Stockard Channing came by, and she got there almost an hour beforehand, and we were just setting up, and we sat down, we talked, and consequently the entire interview was almost done before we got on the air. So when we got on the air, there was basically nothing to talk about, or at least the questions were old hat, and you have to be careful. So I've learned not to talk to the guests too much before they come on. Monday night, Pia, I wasn't ignoring you, but our assistants and other people were basically kind of keeping you
No, that's a good idea. I
occupied,
know
and then
what you
so
mean.
that things appear fresh on the air, as you know, Joe, and you were.
Well,
on
I
the show.
never talk to a guest. I don't even say hello to a guest before the show.
During the show, you do.
During the show, I say a few
Well,
words.
see, we don't have the luxury of having a green room. So.
I have a green room, a
We have
purple
no green
room.
room.
I think.
You
I
don't
think.
say anything. You don't even do a little
Don't say hello. I don't know how many people know that every talk show is prepared. I think I'm the only one. You know, people think that talk shows are ad-lib. They're all on cards.
They are?
No, wait a minute. No.
Send in the cards.
I didn't get mine today.
I figure if you go to a restaurant, you don't prepare your dialogue over the meal. I just wing it. And I think my favorite. Yeah.
It's true, because your show was the first TV show I was ever on.
Right.
I was
lot
beginning
of
to get
people can say
paranoid
that.
because you didn't say hello, you didn't talk
Don't
to me.
hello. I don't say
oh
hello
God,
or
what's
goodbye.
going on here? But that's your style.
Antisocial.
Well, we had a guest on once. It was Priscilla Presley, and we had been told in advance that she was very sensitive about questions about Elvis. So I said, I'm going to violate my oath that I would never talk to anyone before the show, and I'm going to go back and let her know that we respect her as an individual apart from Elvis. But you know, you have to ask questions about Elvis. That was a big mistake because she gave us the impression she did not want to answer any questions about Elvis. Well, what the heck is Priscilla Presley going to talk about? The price of silver? You know, so we did a quick reversal. We dropped her to a lower point in the show. And as it turned out, she was a wonderful guest. She really was. And then we had a friend of Bill's on, a close friend and big fan of his, Fran Lee, once.
There are only been two guests who've ever walked out on the program. One I threw off, and Fran Lee walked off the show.
Yeah. She got very upset with us once because she was bumped from the show because we extended a segment with Mrs. Barbara Tim, who had visited her son in Iran. And that was big news. I mean, I thought that was important enough for us to continue it a little bit more, and Fran got very upset about it.
You got to accept those challenges. When Shirley Temple was on my show, they warned me. They said, Joe, if you say one word about Shirley Temple's old movies, she walks away. You got to give her penal reform, Biafra, abortion, air pollution. But I figured, how can you leave out a chunk of Shirley Temple's life like old movies? I did 1 hour on old movies, and she didn't walk away.
A lot of times the people around the guests will warn you much more than the actual guests themselves.
When Ruby Keeler was on, they said, if you mention Jolson, she gets up, she walks away. They had a very unhappy divorce. But I did a whole hour on Jolson. When Jane Wyman was on, she just about an arthritis cancer telethon in memory of Rosalind Russell. They said, you mentioned Ronald Reagan once, Jane Wyman walks away. I did 40 minutes on Ronald Reagan. She didn't walk away. So
That's it ought to be a classic.
classic
Can you
stuff.
replay it? I'd like to know more
I've got
about
everything.
that.
I got Elvis Presley on tape when Anne Margaret Olsen walked him in. They were having a little romance at the time, and Elvis Presley was on the Sun label. And
Oh,
unknown.
that's a long time ago.
1954, 55.
Yeah, I have some of those Sun records. What do you remember about Elvis Presley, Joe?
When
I mean,
he walked,
obviously you didn't know what was going to happen to
When
this
he-
guy. What was he like?
when he walked toward me, I melted. I knew that he had something. He walked like a ballet star. Remember the way Loretta Young would walk across a TV screen. He was very graceful. And the same thing when Bing Crosby walked toward me, I melted. Because Bing Crosby to me only represented somebody mechanically reproduced. You'd only think of Bing, right, on movie, on TV, on radio, on records, on film. And when Bing Crosby came into my studio, he looked tall in the movies. He walks toward you about 5'7".
Yeah.
But when Bing Crosby, flesh and blood, walked toward me, I absolutely goose pimpled.
But that was a pretty exciting interview.
And he forgot that he was Bing that day. It was like a old-time third-rate vaudevillian. He was at ease. He sang. I heard that he was on one show in town where they wouldn't put on his wife. A lady who used to be on Channel 2 refused.
Kathy, right?
Refused to put on his wife. So he figured he was there. He'll do the interview. He'll plug his appearance at the Uris Theater, but very cold.
Right.
Because he figured he'd get the plug. Didn't say hello. Didn't say goodbye. But I thought it was kind of cruel not to want to put on his wife because she hadn't made a lot of movies. She was a...
What I think is interesting about being on a talk show is that
Right.
our guests aren't paid, right?
You say it?
You're kidding.
You mean it? I'm leaving.
And
After all this?
frequently I find it necessary to break it to them right on the air. The quid pro quo, the equalizer, is they're plugging things frequently, right?
It's true.
Bing Crosby was on midday because he wanted to plug the Uris Theater engagement, which was a wonderful engagement. And it was the only time I ever saw him work live. I walked into the makeup room and Carmen Gebby was putting some makeup on Bing, and he signaled for Carmen to stop, and he whirled around. He said hello, and I said, gee, I really enjoyed the show. I saw it last night. And just as clear as can be, he said, Bill, I need help. The show isn't doing well. People aren't coming out, and if you can help me get some people to come, I'd really appreciate it.
Wow.
And I thought, no one is too big in this business just to be, and that was an important lesson. You think, well, you don't want to mention it. He just laid it right out.
He was
just
an
like
honest
that.
man, right?
Just,
You bet.
just straight and honest.
Great man.
Pia, do you ever get frustrated because your interviews are so short?
Yeah, that's a problem.
2, 3, 4 minutes, and I want to see more of them. The Eddie Money interview, I think it was
Jack did.
John Hambrick.
John Hambrick. I
Was a
away
very
that.
interesting
That was a
one
week
a
ago.
few days ago.
That's a tough thing.
Last week we
hard.
had, this was taped on a Thursday, right? They're seeing it on Monday. But last week we had Mario Cuomo on, and it was the day of the Anderson-Kennedy meeting and the Billy Carter thing. And we had him on, and it was really getting rolling, and all of a sudden you look up and they're doing this, get off, and you got to stop.
But
and
you
it is
got other
frustrating
people
sometimes.
backed up, waiting.
Yeah,
so
and
what
you had
do
to
you
stop
do?
gracefully.
Sometimes we dump them out. We just say we ran out of time. This one went 2 minutes, and another one went another minute, and they are dumped from the show. But
Do you ever have to do this? Excuse me, I have to take a break for a commercial?
Yeah.
no.
Well, I do right now. We'll be back right after this.